The U.S. takes on their other border rivals. The nastiness debate continues, and New England and Chicago carry the MLS banner this weekend. Next on The Daily. Welcome to The Daily. It is Friday, June 1st. I'm Andrew Wiebe. Next to me, Greg Lalas. And Greg, that 5-game slate for the U.S. just continues to roll on. Up to Toronto this weekend to take on Canada, 7 p.m. on Sunday. TV in the U.S. here, NBC Sports Network, in Canada, Sportsnet. We saw a lot of different things against Brazil. Some good, some bad. What do we need to see this game as the U.S. approaches World Cup qualifying?
Well, I think up against Canada, a team that has some real aspirations of making the World Cup for the first time since 1986, and they're preparing for their beginning of qualifying as well. They're going to be taking on Cuba and Honduras as well, so it's big for them to figure out what's going on with their qualifying. But for the U.S., they showed all the attacking ability against Scotland, as well as some pretty good defending. And then they struggled against Brazil. They actually created some chances, but the defense was in trouble. So I am curious to see what will happen in the center of the defense. Will Oguchi Onyewu stay there? Will Jeff Cameron maybe come in for him? Because Gooch struggled against Brazil in particular. Cameron looked good. Against Canada, you're also going to see, is Landon Donovan going to go with Clint Dempsey? Will the two of them start? We've all been waiting to see them start together under Klinsmann. Will this be the chance? And you know, the rivalry between the U.S. and Canada, it's beginning to get better and better and better. They haven't played each other since the Gold Cup. U.S. got a 2-0 victory in Detroit in that one. But we all remember the Gold Cup a couple of years ago when Canada felt like they were, screwed by the referee or something like that, basically. And so I think that there's a rivalry that's beginning to build, and because they're all approaching World Cup qualifying, this is very important for them.
You talked about Clint Dempsey, and he's expected to play on Sunday. Josie Altidore is a guy we did not see against Brazil. Does he come to the lineup, and does Herc Gomez keep his place?
Well, I think Gomez played very well against Brazil. It's certainly getting the goal, but he was struggling when he was alone up top. When Terrence Boyd came in to play alongside him, then they had two strikers up top. They actually looked like a better team. I think that Boyd gave him the size. Against the Canadian backline, I would expect Altidore to be in there. He obviously knows how to score. He also knows how to hold the ball up. That's going to be huge. If he can hold the ball up, play it off to Donovan, Dempsey, or if it's Torres or Bradley, whoever's getting into the attack, that will be big.
Once again, Sunday in the U.S. on NBC Sports Network, in Canada on Sportsnet. That game is at 7 p.m. Eastern. Well, Greg, the word that seems to be dominating conversation about the U.S. team this week, nastiness. That's what Jurgen Klinsmann said this team needs more of if they want to compete with powers like Brazil. A lot of people on different sides of the fence, but what do you make of it? Can the U.S. be nasty? Is that part of the makeup?
Well, that's the question I think a lot of people are wondering right now is there a cultural thing about Americans, if you will, that we aren't nasty, that we play fair? Landon Donovan himself said that's not in our character. We like to play the game fair and square. We don't like to dive. That was his actual quote. Klinsmann is arguing that they need to be nasty if they're going to compete, and actually contradicting something he said a couple of months ago. He actually came out and he said, look, when there's a call that goes against Barcelona, there are 10 guys at the referee saying, hey, why'd you make that call? About 8 months ago or 6 months ago, he said the opposite, basically. He said, when Barcelona plays, they don't complain to the referee. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Look, I think that it may not be in our character per se, but it's something that I think American players need to learn to manage. It's not about necessarily, stepping on toes the way Klinsmann talks about, but understanding that that is part of the game around the world, and don't expect that everybody else is going to play that same way.
The guy that people talk about, obviously, when they say this is Jermaine Jones. You saw that in the tackle against Neymar in the Brazil game. Do they need to go that far, or is there a middle ground to find to really utilize it?
I think there is a middle ground. Part of it is this quote-unquote gamesmanship that everybody likes to talk about, and I think that Jermaine Jones brings that. We are no longer a, quote, naive team. There was a nice piece by Michael Waitala at the Soccer America that said, we can't be saying we're naive anymore. We have plenty of players around the world in the biggest leagues of the world, so there's no reason to be saying we're naive anymore. But I do think that they need to figure out exactly when do you go into that hard tackle? When do you have a professional foul? When do you just let your game flow? And I think that's something the U.S. is still learning. There's plenty of time. World Cup's not for another 2 years, but we're going to see it in World Cup qualifying, especially in CONCACAF. This is what Klinsmann doesn't know much about right now. CONCACAF qualifying and the way it works. When you go to Guatemala, when you go to Jamaica, and you know what? When those teams come to the United States, it's very similar.
Certainly something we'll be looking for against Canada once again, 7 p.m. on Sunday. And while the U.S. takes on their third opponent in about a week, MLS is pretty much empty this weekend. You've got one game, New England taking on Chicago, Saturday, 7:30. You can catch that one on MLS Live. The big question mark for this one is Chicago. They've got a lot of health issues right now, but a guy we haven't seen, Chris Rolfe, it's been 6 weeks since he had that ankle injury. Will he play? That's the big question.
Well, I don't think he's going to play ultimately. He's back in training, and I think that's a great sign, but I think that Rolfe himself is probably not ready to go. Klopas coming out and saying it's great to have him, but we're not going to push him, and that's important, I think, for the Chicago Fire going forward. This is an interesting matchup. Both teams lost to lower division teams in the US Open Cup on Tuesday, and both basically came out and said, quote, we're embarrassed by that, especially New England when they were up 3-0 with about, 9 minutes to go in extra time, and they ended up losing that game on penalties. So they're going to want to try and make amends, and they're both still trying to climb up the Eastern Conference standings a little bit. So this is a big game for them on Saturday night.
A couple more injury notes from the Fire. Dominico Duro still nursing that knock, but expected to be available. Same goes for Patrick Nyarko. Sebastian Grassini expected to return, while Arne Friedrich will be out, waiting for that June 17th matchup against New York. On New England's side, like you said, they played 120 minutes in midweek. A lot of players that they didn't expect to get minutes going there. Clyde Sims likely out. Right. How does that mix come together for Jay Heaps?
Heaps is still trying to find that rhythm for his players. That's why he played a lot of his starters in that US Open Cup game against Harrisburg City Islanders. And so I think that right now, whether it's injuries to Sims or all that, he's going to play as many of his starters as he can to keep that rhythm. That's the key for them. Whether Sims is out, I don't really know who could come into that position. Maybe, Shauri Joseph will probably end up playing a little bit more defensively in this scenario. But it also depends. If the Fire don't have Oduro or Nyarko, that means that they lack that speed going forward. That allows the Revolution to maybe push a little higher defensively, especially when they're at home.
Few final notes from MLS. One team was in action last night in a friendly, Houston Dynamo losing 2-1 to Valencia in a BBVA Compass Dynamo Charity Cup. Also, if you didn't catch ETR yesterday, go out and catch that Buzzsprout, iTunes, and Stitcher. The guys talked to Taylor Twellman, break down the whole nastiness debate, talk about US Open Cup and whether teams aren't taking that seriously. You can catch all the latest news on MLSsoccer.com. We'll see you on Monday.